Hello, you wonderful people of the internet. My name is Justin. I am also known as the Cinemaverick, and today I'm going to be talking about Paul Thomas Anderson in my PT Ander-Thon, the first feature film from Paul Thomas Anderson, which is Sydney. It was actually released as Hard 8, but that was a title that was decided on by the studio and not by PTA himself. So, I'm going to be referring to it as Sydney as the director and writer refers to it. Anyway, the idea for this film really came from a character in a film called Midnight Run, which stars Robert De Niro and Charles Grodin. Great buddy comedy from the 80s, where Philip Baker Hall, who is the star of this movie, was also in Cigarettes and Coffee, played this kind of like advisor to the Dennis Farina character, who's this kind of mobster, and that character's name was actually Sydney. So Anderson kind of used that as an inspiration, and he really loved that actor. And when he went through with this film, he actually worked on it at Sundance Lab with a couple of people, and he actually took Phil Baker Hall with him and John C. Reilly, who would also be in this movie. They also came with him. So he shot his film Sydney. He edited his own version, and the studio wanted to do their own cut because they were afraid it wasn't going to be commercial enough. They wanted to call it Hard 8 because they were afraid that the title was going to sound like, some kind of film that takes place in Australia. So he had a lot of problems with the studio, so much so that he actually has called it a very dark period in his career. But it all worked out. He got to release his own cut. Unfortunately, they did take the title, but can't win them all. So the premise of this movie, and it is kind of a smaller scale than you might be used to in a Paul Thomas Anderson film. You have this professional gambler named Sydney who takes this younger guy. He's this really down, John C. Reilly's character, this down and out, he's lost all his money in Vegas. He's trying to win this money actually to bury his mother. His mother has just passed away. And and Sydney takes the man John under his wing and teaches him the ins and outs of gambling. And I think some of that gets so there's kind of like a father-son dynamic there that gets complicated once you throw in a character who appears later on in Clementine, who's played by Gwyneth Paltrow in one of her pretty early roles. And then you also have another character who is one of John's friends later on, named Jimmy, who is kind of a shady character who's played by Samuel L. Jackson. So I like how this film has. I do like the smaller scale because it really does kind of put emphasis on the relationships, and it really does hook you in very early on through the writing, through the editing, and the filmmaking. I love the smoothness of the camera shots. I love the way it, especially that kind of smooth camera work that just glides along these casino floors. And there's all this overlapping dialogue, especially early on. So it feels like there's all these things happening at once. So the lessons that are being passed on by the older generation to the younger generation are sort of him passing on, him talking and him explaining how John is going to do this stuff, how John's going to pull this rate card trick in the casino, and then to see John actually doing it, that's kind of simultaneous. I really love that. And I love the quality of the dialogue, and I'm sure we're going to see this in his other movies. I think, especially early on in his career, there was a very Mamet-esque quality. David Mamet, who is known for his very terse, kind of tough guy dialogue. There's a lot of repetition here, and I love the reliance on certain phrases. The Jimmy character, Samuel L. Jackson's character, actually has this one thing of saying when the Sydney character asks him what he does, he says security, and Sydney says, "Oh, in the parking lot?" And he says, "No. I do work on security inside the casino," and that's supposed to be. I love how, and also it's a credit to how Jackson says it, that it really becomes this no, I'm not down there. I'm not that low on the totem pole. I'm way up here on the totem pole. And he repeats it later on once there's another exchange between them later on, which I really want to try to avoid spoilers like I did with cigarettes and coffee, so I won't get into that. But I love that. I love the repetition of certain phrases because it really is says a lot about those characters and how they use them to mean certain things. I like the Reno setting here. The look of the casinos, like they're very weirdly lit. And actually, the first part of the film does take place in Vegas, and then it kind of moves to most of the film takes place in Reno, which I find kind of interesting. So it's like this move from a larger city to a relatively smaller city, but still that has enough of the gambling and the casinos. And the other thing about this film that really I think is a huge deal is just the central performance of Philip Baker Hall as Sidney. He's really just this calm, confident, patient figure, and you can tell he's been around a lot. He's seen a lot, and you get some kind of inkling he may have kind of a darker past, perhaps. And if you learn more about that, I won't say more. But I love that. And I just love how cool and collected he is, even in the most tense situations. But what I also really like is I love the moments when that demeanor, that kind of coldness, that kind of carefulness, suddenly breaks when something happens. And I think Hall's really skilled at pulling off that transformation and not just making it seem out of character. Of course, it's also a credit, I think, to the way the character is written. And, the supporting cast here is great as well. You have John C. Reilly. Again, I don't think he was very well known at this point. He'd probably been around for a little bit. But it's funny because all these characters, I almost feel like, I don't mean this in a bad way, but it almost seems like they're all coming from different movies. And that's a good thing because I think one of the pleasures of this movie is seeing those different personalities clashing and meeting sometimes, finding some common ground, but feeling like they're really coming in, and a lot of the humor comes from those personality clashes, I think. So I really think John C. Reilly's a lot more low key and laid back and understated. Probably some of the finest work from Gwyneth Paltrow that I've seen. She plays this cocktail waitress, sometime prostitute, to pay the bills, really. And I love how Paltrow doesn't shy away from playing her, really showing like an ugly side to this character. Even though she is a likable character, but she does have this side to her that I think Paltrow doesn't shy away from portraying. And of course you have Samuel L. Jackson as Jimmy, and really throwing a wrench into the proceedings, because he's just like a force of nature. And I love the contrast between him and the Sidney character, and that especially becomes important when the two characters learn a little bit more about each other later on. So, I really want to praise the acting here, and I specifically want to praise the acting because this is a small kind of character piece. It's really those four characters, and then there's like a cameo from Philip Seymour Hoffman, which is hilarious and brilliantly sets up sort of the turning point of the film, I think. So this is a really great debut from Anderson. I think it's, I wonder if it's maybe a little bit distant. There's a smaller scale to it. I don't know if the relationship between John and Clementine worked as well for me. I felt like there was something maybe missing there. And I think maybe some of the pacing isn't as tight as it should be, particularly some of the scenes later between Jimmy and Sidney. I think they kind of go on for a while, and I think he could have trimmed that up a little bit, perhaps. But this on the whole, like, this is a fantastic first film. I think most filmmakers would be proud to make a film of this at any point in their career, honestly. I'm not sure many experienced filmmakers could even make it, with their experience. So that's a credit to Anderson. This is really, this film, he submitted it to Cannes, his own cut, and it was screened there, not in the regular competition. Uncertain Regard, I think, Uncertain Regard, that kind of that category, which is I think designed for younger filmmakers. And he would go on to get funding for the next film that I'm going to talk about, and I cannot wait to see it. I can't wait to talk about it. It is from 1997, Boogie Nights. This really was, as much as Sidney really got his furthered his career, and Cigarettes and Coffee kind of started it. Sidney kind of furthered it. He became a little bit more known with the studios. Boogie Nights was really his big breakout. It was a real hit, critically, and it was really popular too. So that's going to be what I'm discussing next time. This has been my review of Sidney, also known as Hard 8. I want to thank you for watching, and yeah, I'll see you next time for Boogie Nights. So I'll catch you on the flip side.